Good day, folks. This is Mark from the Resound Music channel on YouTube, and welcome to the VISIONS Webcast. The VISIONS Webcast was an idea that I came up with in the spring of 2020, and I don't think I need to remind any of you what was going on during the spring of 2020. What I was aiming to do with this channel, with this VISIONS Webcast, is to have people of all different backgrounds, musicians, chefs, artists, farmers, factory workers, just anybody. The idea is interesting people talking about interesting things. No filters, no topics are off the table, but to have us come together and discuss things maturely, not in a social media fashion. To do this in a way that will allow further understanding about why we are where we are, why your position is your position, and why my position is my position. Not pointing fingers, not yelling, not blaming, not calling anyone out on being uneducated, but to talk about it. Because we are really in this all together. And the only way that we can get through is to be together. The more divided we become, the worse things are going to get. So let's not let that happen. So in this episode of the VISIONS Webcast, it's the first video one. I have some audio ones in the works, but I'm welcoming my friends Andrea and Todd Allen. Now, I've known them casually for a few years, and they're very interesting people. I love seeing what they post on Facebook, very inspirational material, quotes, daily activities, meditations, and I thought, what a wonderful thing it would be to have them on to discuss spiritual equilibrium in a world that feels like it's falling apart. Now, unfortunately, there was an error in the video recording, the video stream that we did through Zoom at the beginning. And we're going to drop in just 45 seconds into the conversation because it's easier to just explain what happened than go back and redo the entire video. So Andrea is at home in this video, Todd is in his truck at work, I'm in my home studio, and at present where we drop in, we are discussing what it feels like to be in winter.
Mostly it feels very nurturing and very cozy, and it's almost easier to be fully immersed in it a little bit more out in nature than I think compared to when I experienced winter living in more urban areas. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess you're more in touch with the change of seasons and stuff like that. So
it's like right outside your door all the time, so there's not that urban space between you and the seasons of nature. And I think that helps. I don't know, it's like a more of a bridge between what that season can do for your own kind of personal process. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. And how do you find the winters, Todd?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just building on what Andrew was saying there, do you honor the hibernation or not? And I know in more of an urban center, it was more of a go, go, go mentality. Sure, it was January, February, but there were still things to do and you just kept doing it.
Right.
Here, there's more of a seasonal balance here, where people are more apt to, you work hard in the spring, summer, autumn, and the winter is very much a hibernation time. And having spent a bunch of time in Hawaii, it's where there things are definitely quality of life focused more so than success focused. And here there's a similarity with Haliburton County in that, really honoring the winter of just that there's a lot less things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So
And you can't get away from it. I mean, when it snows on everybody, and everybody's road gets blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last week or so, it felt like prior to that, it snowed for like 5 or 6 days straight. Some of those days were pretty light snow, but we got dumped on pretty heavily in there as well too. And it's just like, well, life stands still a little bit more. You spend, some time clearing snow out. And,
Mm-hmm.
my old way of being in a more urban center would be, okay, I've got to get this done before I've still got to get out the door for 8 o'clock and do everything else. So I've got to be up and clearing snow at 6. There's not the same focus. There's not the same emphasis on that. And, Andrea's helped me a great deal in being more gentle about my approaches to things. Remember,
Gentle about your approaches. Now expand on that. Has Todd become short with the weather sometimes?
Well, I'm giggling because, I'm also kind of the side of our relationship that is like, leave the driveway, leave the grass. It's natural. Don't cut that tree down. It's here. It's part of nature. And Todd wants to manicure and create, a little bit more of a, I don't know, like impart some of our own kind of will on the creation of our spaces. I mean, part of that, like, literally is logistical, like you have to plow the driveway, but I encourage a little bit more of a gentle approach to it, because it's like, it's going to be there in an hour. Just have your coffee and then go do it. So I don't know, that can be good and bad, because, sometimes I need a little bit more fire under me. So it goes both ways. He gives that to me and I give the other way to him. So we've been talking that, like, our relationship is this, like, really cool, masculine, feminine, yin yang thing that we hold. And sometimes it's ultra supportive and balanced, and other times it's just like clashy. So
well, that's the nature of polarities, right? I mean, if you're with somebody who's too much the same, it's not long before you start to maybe, like, resent that person for showing you too much of yourself or something. I don't know. I've heard that from people. That's like, they say about opposites attract, right? I think we thrive on that. We need it. It's like having your favorite thing for supper every night. Eventually you're tired of it.
Yeah. It's like, if you're, I've thought before, in the past, well, if I could just have someone, back when I was single, I thought, if I can have someone that just I really click with, that we just see eye to eye on things. But it's like, you say that gets boring, and you're just not getting that proper reflection back, maybe a mirroring of your own stuff that doesn't totally resonate another person. And, Andrea and I like to say lots of times, that this was a Ram Dass thing, but that relationships are like sandpaper. We're just grinding off those rough edges of each other. But those times when it feels like a real heavy 24 grit sandpaper, there's times where it's like you're polishing glass with like that 10,000 grit sandpaper.
Yeah, that's a nice analogy. It's a nice analogy.
Yeah, it articulates it well, in my opinion. I'm a pretty visual guy, so I can really see that, and see those rough edges. And it's given me greater understanding of, a real strong visual of what those rough edges really look like. And from an awareness point of view and how we work on ourselves, that's good. There's times where it can just feel like too much, and a bit like I don't really want to see that so clearly right now.
Yeah, trying to find some means of balance. And that was like when I first had the idea for this Visions webcast. You two folks were somebody that came up in my mind foremostly, because that was when we were in the depths of all of the lockdown stuff of the pandemic. And a lot of people I knew weren't coping. And that was what made me want to reach out to you, is to ask you guys what you do to maintain a spiritual equilibrium. And I'm not talking just like mental health. I'm talking spiritual equilibrium during those times when it seems like the world is falling apart. Because I think when you're in touch with the more subtle levels and layers of not only yourselves, but you feel it in the people around you, you feel it in nature around you, and it's like it can affect, us empathic people more than it does others. So how did you guys fare during the pandemic lockdowns now that we're apparently out of it?
Well, the Ukraine war happened and then COVID went away.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
So we'll hand the floor to Andrea now.
After that one. No. I think part of what we sort of spoke to this the other day, actually, Todd, is that part of it felt for me as if we were in like one of the best sort of pockets of time and space and geography, I guess, to go through that. So that sort of fortune or like, sort of divine timing is like not lost on me. Like our kids were not old enough to really need to know all the details. So we could keep a lot of the conversation basically zero with them. They weren't in programming that was taken away from them. Okay. We homeschool and as well. So some of our community was still growing because they were young and also of a similar mindset that it was really beneficial to keep seeing one another, that we all needed that. So we found like ways quite gracefully to somewhat like continue on normally, I guess.
Nice.
And I think it was that like structure of, you know what, I'm really not gonna buy in and plug in to this any more than we kind of have to. And that helped create like our own like energy space that it didn't feel like there was a lot infiltrating it. What we had talked about recently was that actually holding that energy around ourselves took a lot of energy.
It does.
And we've been feeling that kind of depletion or exhaustion of just holding that our own truth space so securely for so long. And it's like, whoo, that was a lot. Like I didn't necessarily feel at the time like we were doing anything. And I was like really holding that so strongly. But now that we've been able to release it a little bit because we're not experiencing those infringements as much, you kind of come away from it and the hindsight is like, whoa, that was a lot. How do we kind of rebuild and like re-strengthen and nurture ourselves after such a big go? And a lot of it also came from, I think, like looking at it maybe from like a bird's eye view of seeing the bigger picture of how all of this is actually just bringing us forward. It's kind of like the necessary implosion that might be bringing us forward, or I see as bringing us forward into kind of an, advancement of humanity. And there's a really nice story that I heard from Zach Bush. I don't know if you're familiar with any of his talks or anything. He's a MD, but has kind of gone rogue, if you will, and talks a lot and has worked a little bit with like an indigenous tribe from South America. And they long ago had a vision of the, this bird flying with one wing. And so it would just be flying in circles. And that one wing is like the divine masculine. And so part of this other wing unfolding, the divine feminine, for this bird to fly straight is like, what's happening to humanity right now is like this real breakdown and then acceptance of the other half of the equation to kind of bring us forward in a clear way. So I really like that analogy. And I see this as part of that process, even though that's like the highest view. Sometimes I'm, get frustrated and kind of down in the dregs of what is happening and, the inanity and, the darkness of it for sure can be a place that like we can easily like discuss and go. But our family, like with our kids being young and kind of growing up into that too, kind of we saw this growth in our community and this growth in their development and engagement. And so that was really uplifting at the same time. So it's like, as we came out of this, then all of a sudden there's, programming for our kids and other families doing the same thing and people really wanting to be together again. And some of like my yoga and dance classes, saw a little bit of a lift, and it was all timed like for us very beautifully. So I feel very fortunate and very like blessed in that way, because I know it didn't really go that way for a lot of people. So
No.
anyhow, that's kind of a lot of things in one from my perspective, but I don't know.
Todd's take on the timing was with Ukraine war came and then COVID was gone. And that's, those things are commonly discussed. And, when you talk about a bird's eye view and we step back, decades and decades, and there's always some, global threat. We're going to run out of oil, the ozone layer is going to go flying off the earth. And there's always something new, true, to take us away from the cause du jour. So, yeah. Do you want to expand on that, Todd, about the distractions that you're seeing?
Yeah.
It's bigger than a bread box, eh?
Yeah, where to begin is where I'm, just asking in my head, my guides. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's become fairly clear to me over the last decade is the amount of confusion and fear that is promulgated by the quote unquote leadership of the world, if we can call our government leaders. I don't truly believe that fits, but we'll throw that in there. And how much that keeps us disempowered, keeps us from really recognizing our greatness within each of us, keeps us striving for what we love, keeps us from, tuning into the creative pursuits that all lie within us, the artist that's within all of us. And I don't want to go into it too much from a negative point of view, because I don't want to give that energy. And I've certainly done that a lot, but I feel, is what I'm drawn to share about is that, as the lockdowns went on and just the flavor of that time, give up late March, April 2020, I have to admit I was a bit shaken by that mass confusion and fear that was unleashed in that time. And I think what took me aback the most was how much the world shifted, how literally it came to a stop within a matter of days as a result of that fear and confusion. Yeah. And there was a part of me that just was absolutely blown away by that fact. Then I started to think, I started to really feel into the uncertainty, the unknown that existed there, and how much we'd all been traumatized as a world, just even with the uncertainty of what lies ahead. And I'm not even a person who gets too worked up about what's next, knowing that it's all going to unfold. I have visions that I feel I'm working towards that are a preview of, future events that I'm grateful about, but I try to be in the moment as much as possible. But Andrea can certainly attest I'm a work in progress on however, back to that time and, how to deal with that mass confusion and fear was something I got to thinking in that early, March, April 2020, that I had moments of, I thought, holy shit, we've brought children into this world, and what have we done? Yet in quiet time, journaling, prayer, meditation, it really came through, of which I'd known already, but this was really a test for me to say, we wouldn't be here if we didn't have work to do, if we weren't meant to be here at this time. So that was reassuring to recenter into that truth. And then also thought, well, how do we explain this to our children? I don't want to add too much to the fear-based propaganda that's been spread writ large, yet there's definitely something going on. And, how do I explain this to a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old and 6-year-old, as we've gone along. And the one thing that we've come to, and I can't even really remember how this came about, but it was just one day that I thought, well, just explain it as, there are people who are who understand truth in this world and who stand up for truth. And there's people who feel that being without truth is the right path. And, that was something our children could understand, because we do talk about that in our household. And our one child, can certainly like to spin a yarn and, exaggerate a little bit. And, so we have this saying, the truth is like a lion, set it free, it defends itself. So, if there ever feels like there is, the story is going down, a little bit of a BS-y sort of way, we'll say, remember, the truth is like a lion. And so talking about standing up for truth in the world and what is real rather than what isn't, was something that really resonated with our children and already had a basis within our family. And, flowing that with that felt really beneficial. And so that, to tie it back to the question initially of, how to deal with, I'm going to say the confusion and fear. I can't remember exactly what you said, Mark, but was really connecting with the truth of what we all are. Mm-hmm. And, it started, I realized the gift that came about divinely to just share with our children, what do we feel is truth? And do we feel like, even from the standpoint, do we need Western medicine? Well, it does amazing things. It's great for dealing with us when we're in a state of trauma, but it's not great at dealing with root causes of things. It's great with dealing with symptoms. But, that I think can be, again, a metaphor for the entire world. Can we just put a Band-Aid on this and pretend it doesn't exist, pretend this symptom doesn't exist, and move on with the next thing? Mm-hmm. And so, centering back in that truth of what's really happening, of what Andrea was alluding to, that we are going through this upgrade, this up-level in consciousness on the planet. And, can we really center in that? What are necessary things to do as the consciousness up-levels? And how do we share? What do we share with people? And I feel, can we focus on how great we truly are and the potential that exists within all of us? Mm-hmm. And these are things that I've been focusing on. And just to wrap it up, I had a real shift probably maybe in early 2021. I started having some weekly chats with an old spiritual friend. And I said to her, what was your reaction when this all started? And she said, I got really excited. She said, I'd been thinking there was, I knew there was going to be a shift. But she said, I started to lose hope. I thought by like 2018, 2019, 2020, was something really going to happen. And then COVID happened, and she said, I realized that now it's really started. Now there's those of us who really recognize the truth and who are here to help usher in the new world. And there's those who, don't want to move along with truth and create a sustainable world, one that's based in our own individual greatness. Mm-hmm. And now it's finally changing. And so that was really a nice moment for me to say, okay, she's totally flipped this around, to look at it from a different perspective. And it was very inspiring and motivating for me to take a similar approach.
That's great. So it sounds like your both of your focus became your children and your home, it's wonderful. And in doing so, you relied upon one another and yourselves and your community, and you found a strength, maybe a reserve of strength or whatever that maybe you had forgotten to acknowledge sometimes, right? When we rely so much on the world around us, it's so many people were glued to the news cycle going, what do I do? What do I do? What am I supposed to be expecting next? And that diminishes people a lot. But when those people gather on social media, they support one another and they kind of reinforce the negativity. And if you choose to withdraw from that, the big takeaway is you find a strength within yourself that means that you don't have to look to some outside authority figure to tell you what you should be thinking or tell you what you should be feeling or even doing. You're blessed to have been already homeschooling your kids and they didn't have that abrupt transition. There was a lot of kids that I know that just they didn't cope. They would be half asleep, playing video games while they're on the split screen while their teacher was trying to get their attention. And, so it was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, real, lots of tragedy there. The one thing that's really stood out to me is with the lockdowns and keeping the children out of school, keeping the children out of schools, was that, for how many kids, who were not getting breakfast if they didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Oh, that we're no longer getting that. The kids where school was a safe space, I mean, we do live in an area where, I think that further north you go, that levels of alcoholism and drug abuse does seem to increase. And, or if those people are all stuck at home together, children as well as, parents aren't working, what did that look like?
Yeah, the day drinking memes were funny for a week or so.
Right. And then the reality of that sets in as like a lot of self-harm happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So the fact that you guys, shielded your children from it is an amazing thing. A lot of people were frustrated that they had to stay at home or irritated that they had to be around their kids all day. And it sounds like it was, like you said, a blessing in a way, that it's like, yeah, let's just
Kind of what we were used to anyhow. So
yeah.
it's provided, in seeing the different ways that it affected others who, had more of this, like, okay, you're at home together as being like a very, different circumstance, seeing how that affected people and just gave us, I think, a point of like reference or maybe some contrast that actually was reaffirming to a lot of our choices and gave us a little bit, just a bit more fortitude, I guess, in continuing along the path that we had already chosen. But I think I don't know, for me at least, I guess maybe not for all people, but for me at least, really sort of feeling like a bit of a trailblazer, like maybe not in the world, but certainly from what I grew up with, or, what is still fairly mainstream. As you move away from that, there's always this like, oh, should I be doing this? Is this wrong? Is this weird? What do people think? Like, I have some of those I have had some of those doubtful tendencies, but, this has been very much a time of like strengthening that, course of direction. So
Nice.
even I was remembering, Todd, when you were speaking about how we, speak to our children about truth and standing up for truth, and that some people want to, hide the truth and what have you, and those being sort of the two sides. I was remembering how at the very beginning, I think, they were probably like, our oldest was maybe 5 or nearly 6 at the time. And so we started calling COVID. So they didn't even know the word COVID for a long time. We just started calling it the big healing, was what it's the big, everyone's at home for the big healing. That's why we're not going to forest school or whatever.
So you were
And
homeschooling prior to the lockdowns, is that?
yeah, our children have never been to a public school situation. So they go to forest school and some homeschooling programming that happens
Oh, cool.
in the area. So they have like a couple of days a week that they're out of the house doing programming, but the rest of the time we were here anyhow. So there was some disruption in their forest school, but we were able to talk about it in a way that like framed it like with more of a purpose. So, we're all healing. And really it was this time where people were, maybe not all embracing this, but you could go inward and you could look at, okay, like, what is my role here? What do I believe? What does this mean for me? How am I participating? Do I want to continue? What am I clinging to? Like, there were so many questions that could arise in those, or confront you as well, like in those, quieter moments, where you weren't just like running life as usual. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of this, because even like as a I don't know, as a person who likes to be introspective, I realize I can also very easily feel like I don't have time for that. I don't have time to journal. I don't have time to get quiet enough to really look at my own processing and look at where I am in my life and like go in there. I can easily be like, well, we got to do this, we got to do that, and the kids and the lunch and the whole thing. And you just, even if you like, I don't know, like I love those things. I loved being part of all of those things and they're positive. It's just, if you don't ever sort of like stop the ride really purposefully to like quiet in and notice, then it's so easy to never do it. And I think like even yesterday, I took the day just quietly for myself and Todd went skiing with the children. And it was like the most amazing, nurturing day because I felt like I had the amount of like space and quietude to do a whole bunch of reflecting. And I'm hoping that at least, you know, some positive things have come from the COVID situation where people were able to like almost be like, oh my gosh, like I've been on this ride and I don't think I want to get back on now that I'm off. Like that's a really positive part of it too. And we're seeing this sort of two streams, I think, you know, happening, and maybe one will just end in self-destruct.
Well, that's
and the other one will continue and birth this sort of whole new kind of existence. I don't know how long it will take for that to happen. It may not be like immediate, but
there's going to be pushback.
yeah.
Well, you talk about silver lining. It's like, you know, you could also rebrand the silver lining as the double-edged sword.
Sure.
Where people were gaining new independence from the office and being able to work remotely. And now, you know, they're saying that, you know, they're trying to mandate people to come back to the office. And we're talking 2 years later, you know, for 2 days a week, come on, we'll have pizza or something like that. And it's like, people are like, no way, man. No. So they discover something about themselves, where they're allowing themselves to maybe enjoy introspection. Whereas before it's like, you know, it's a dark place. You don't want to go. Don't think about yourself too much. You know, you might freak yourself out, or, you know, don't meditate. That's for weirdos. And then it's like, it's common now. I mean, if you think while you're driving, you know, without closing your eyes, you're meditating on something. But it's like, for me, a big thing is my cynicism. And if we circle back to the idea about seeing truth, and seeing things like, you know, when Todd, when you mentioned that, you know, the Ukraine war came, so COVID left, right? You know, some people would say, well, that's just a conspiracy. How can you think that? And then it's like, well, you know, it's kind of true, you know, and then it's like having the inner cynic, not take the steering wheel. And it's a hard one for me, because I mean, like, even during, you know, the start of the lockdown, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do here for 2 weeks or 15 days or whatever it was supposed to be? And I had time to get back to recording my music. And so in a flurry of like 6 weeks, I recorded a whole album of stuff, got the photography done, got the mastering done, mixed, sent out, it's on Spotify. And then I was like, all right, now what? You know, it's trying to keep that inner focus. That's the thing, day to day, when we had kind of no choice when we were locked down. And now that our day to day routines are back, there's the risk of losing that again.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really, I know we were very fortunate. We were blessed in that our world didn't interrupt too much. You know, like I was fortunate enough that working as well in carpentry, that was considered an essential service if there were ongoing projects that were homes being built, and that did align with what I was working on at the time. So, you know, so there was still, you know, a going out into the world. And, you know, I'm grateful I didn't have to make that choice to, you know, am I defying something else? I mean, I'm naturally a contrarian. I've been that way since I've been, as long as I can remember, knee high to a grasshopper, as my grandfather would say. That's, you know, so that desire to want to go against the grain is high. Yet I've also realized on my spiritual journey that, okay, you know, we're still karmically we're creating some confusion there. If we are inciting passion in another, then we are accruing more karma. So is this something I really want to do? So it was great to be able to still go out in the world, under the guidelines that the government still set out, that I could legally do that, but be one of those people who was going out into the world and still going into the building centers, the grocery store, and seeing a lot of fear. Oh, our pups are being heard from. So seeing a lot of people out there and seeing the fear. And I remember it was a real conscious thing for me that comes very easily anyhow, but okay, I've got to spread even more light than what I can right now. And so that included at the beginning, just going out and thanking people for being there, and really appreciate you doing this, even though they were considered a quote unquote essential service. Yet there was still some fear of going out there and catching COVID, because we were all propagandized to fear our neighbor, anyone who might be within 6 feet of us, they could kill us. And if it doesn't kill us, well, we might take it home and give it to Uncle Fred or Grandma, or, all of these things that I just think, it's one thing to protect the weak and the people who should be looked after, but to incite fear at that level, what the karmic consequences of what has gone on in this world isn't for me to concern myself about, but I do wonder sometimes, like what this looks like as a world writ large by those who aren't connected to the truth. What does that look like for their evolution as a soul? And that has drawn some cynicism and some ire within me, but ultimately it comes down to compassion, for really those who have wished to control us to that extent are only coming from a place of fear themselves, that if they don't shape the world in the direction that they feel is necessary, they're going to lose some of the truth that they know as a being. And because we've all known fear on some level, it might not be that fear, that helps me have compassion for them and know that there's still goodness there. There's part of me that sometimes has had to, if I get really frustrated with the fact that, as I believe that a lot of the world has been systematically killed off by those who stand behind an extinctionism structure of thoughts and beliefs. I can really get down on that and get down on those people, yet when I come from it looking at a place of, they're just people who've been fearful of that their way of being is not going to continue and that they have to do something about it. That helps me reframe it. And my go-to always, if I have difficulty with another being, is imagine them as a baby and imagine me holding them in their arms as a newborn, like I've done it with Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab or Justin Trudeau, and just, like, you are such a beautiful being and I love you so much. And the potential that you have in this world is vast, and
I'm not laughing at your notion of nurturing, Todd. I'm laughing at the notion of you holding a baby Klaus Schwab. I know it's hard, like the idea of compassion towards somebody who basically wants to take your stuff away. At some point, where does the line between the compassionate and the warrior come out? Where is it defined? How far does it get pushed? I heard this quote the other day, and it was a man talking, but I'll make it gender neutral. And they said the most dangerous person in the world is the person that wants to be left alone. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, I have my introverted tendencies. I'm by no means a joiner. I mean, I teach music. I see people all day long, so I can talk to people. I enjoy talking to people. But like Andrea, when you were saying about your glorious day of free time for introspection, I thrive on that, and it's like, well, how far is someone going to get pushed before the compassionate one just says, okay, enough is enough. This is the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm not the same person for you anymore. Yeah.
I think those boundaries are like individual, but like very real, like very, very real, like where you can extend, it's like you're sort of extending that field of compassion as far as you can, hopefully, like every person probably has a little bit more reach. Hey, that was our thing today. Todd posted about reach, maybe not in quite the same way, but that's the word that came through, is like this, what is your reach of compassion to offer to the world, where you're able to, you're giving this like grace that it's, and maybe with the notion that this is all happening as it's meant to unfold. And so we can like hate on this and we can be negative about all of it, or we can be as compassionate as possible and help sort of like usher it along, with a little bit more grace as opposed to that.
And everybody
like real aggressiveness.
Yeah, everybody's personal karmic, dharmic programming or worksheet, whatever you want to call it, is put them right where they need to be.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And that as you've spoke about like the karmic and dharmic aspects of it. It's like some people are meant to be like working for, Health Canada and like on those mandates, policies, whatever. And some people are meant to be, holding space out in the woods, and it's all part of the picture. So yeah, it's very interesting to take live our roles out and have those interactions. Like, I think about your quote when you mentioned, is it the most dangerous person?
The most dangerous person in the world is the one that wants to be left alone.
Left alone. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes me think about how if I felt maybe isolated, or I have felt introverted for a time and just taken space, then I realize I'm like, oh, there hasn't been a lot of variety in this feedback loop. It's been a lot of me. It's been a lot of the same. And then you get out and you even just, have a conversation with, the friend, another mom friend or another family, or you reach out or you call or you have some sort of interaction. All of a sudden you have this new kind of vibration, some new ideas in your feedback loop. And then that's like some new ingredients to work with. And I feel that like that inflow so strongly, and is like gives a lot of energy and inspiration. And when, spending endless time on one's own, unless maybe, I don't know, here, I guess this is a question like, okay, so, but what if you were tuning in and meditating and like downloading all kinds of new feedback? Like, is that enough input into the system that you wouldn't, kind of go on monotone? I don't know. That's a question.
How do you see that change in people that come to you for yoga instruction or dance instruction, that their demeanor changes? How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, a lot of the feedback from people who come to yoga, like I teach yoga mostly to adults and dance mostly to children. So with the yoga folks who come out, I think there's because I usually have a theme or kind of an idea that the physical class rides on. They often say like, oh, for the whole week, your idea about X, Y, or Z was sort of circling through, and this happened and that happened. And I thought of you, and I, I did this or did that. And so it's like you plant these little seeds and see where it shows up as the person goes back out into their life. And maybe that's what that interaction is all about, is just like sprinkling these new seeds kind of in our own terrain and seeing what sprouts, or seeing how that interacts. And that's pretty amazing. Like it really is like a beautiful way to look at like how we engage in the world. It's like, what are we offering? What are we receiving? And yeah, it's pretty beautiful. I mean, that's like really a great, the whole benefit of teaching yoga. Like, I realize it is in this case, a physical practice, but to me, it really is like, let's have some focused time, ruminating on an idea, and let the practice be what infuses focus and energy in that idea, and then see what happens. You kind of go back out into the world, and then the ripples start moving
Nice.
out. Yeah.
Nice. So, Todd, when you were saying about, no, I understand you're a carpenter. Or did we catch you on your lunch hour in your truck or something here?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We're not together.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of noticed that, but so when you talk about like what Andrea was saying about like the trickle effect of like, your energy and your inspirations going out, can you work that into carpentry? Can you build with intent? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How does that work for you? Like, I know, like if you're a musician or something, or if you are a painter, you can see these things unfold in a very visual way, but like subtly. Like, what does that mean for you as a carpenter? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's really, I guess, to give you a bit of background, I'm pretty addicted to transformation. I get a real high from seeing transformation in the world, whether it's in myself, whether it's in a space I'm working on, whether it's with a healing client. That really, when we can look at things the way they are and then take them to a new level, and transform them. To me, that's something really worthy of getting excited about. To me, that's really that's evolution in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to take that approach, to both healing and creating things. And, for me, from a building aspect, it's something, if it's overly planned from the outset, it's very difficult to bring in a real divine intent, if you will, or at least the highest possible outcome, between you and the client and the space where you're working, because it's all a synergy.
Mm-hmm.
What helps for me is when you work with clients, I often ask, what are 3 words or phrases that can really articulate what your vision is that you wish to create? And that really catalyzes for me an ability to get into the person's space a little bit more, to really bring about that vision. It lets me start to worm around in it. I get, a lot of intuitive insights will come through for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so then that being the starting point, and then I usually like to structure it. I'll take that information away, what their vision is for it, and then be able to sit with it for a few days and allow the vision to come through for me as to what's the starting point, what are the first steps that we need to take here.
That's great.
And then be able to work that way. So this works great with some clients. It doesn't work well with other clients, is that I like to work it pretty organically. Here's a ballpark budget of where I think we're going to be. I don't know exactly where it's going to end up, other than we're going to come up with the exact right fit for your home, for your space, your piece of furniture, whatever it is. And then, and so I had a great experience in the summertime working on this beautiful old house back in Lindsay, actually, that was a place that I'd wanted to work on for, years, that I'd put out there, probably over a decade ago. I'd love to work on that place. If that veranda, if they ever wanted to redo it, I would love to do that work. And so lo and behold, it came about, and there's some other cool synchronicities in there as well that I don't need to get into. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, that often happen in those divinely ordained projects or circumstances. So we, at first, they really wanted, they were okay with the organic approach, but then we got into it, looking at budgetary considerations, and they were really like, no, we just need to be able to wrap this up in one phase. Okay. Well, here it is. Even though I'm not It's like, I know that's not what I'm feeling, but working in politics years ago, like we've talked about before, gave me a healthy dose of pragmatism, and in this situation, it was like, well, we need to follow along. As my grandfather would say, he who pays the buck plays the tune. So we've got to marry my intention with the clients as well. But the long and the short of it is that they wanted to do all this extra stuff. It was an old Victorian place. We got going along, and I said, really think this is going to be too much. I'm sure we can all envision that very eccentrically done Victorian place that's got more finials and wood turnings and corbels and gingerbread and whatever you want than you really can shake a stick at. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up curbing back on some of those and doing some work in another area that allowed us to move more in that organic way. And they said to me afterwards, Todd, it was great to really follow that process of moving along with what came up was exactly what needed to happen, and we're done with a finished product that we didn't know exactly what we wanted with all these details, but this is exactly what we wanted. So I think, to sum it up, when you can move in an organic way, yet still being productive, moving in the right direction, but following that process, to me, that house as well, is 150-year-old house. To me, that house is a being. Think of how many times it's been a home to how many different families over those 15 decades. And so to me, there's a real spirit that you have to connect with, an energy of the space you're working on, of the clients you're working for, and trying to bring those all together. I really find, though, for me, I don't have to do a whole lot as long as I'm engaging in prayer and intention that backs that up as well and is seeing the highest outcome. And that's really what it's all about, So to me, to sum it up, follow your process that works, be pragmatic, be flexible along the way, and ultimately, leave it up to a higher power, and you end up exactly where you're supposed to be.
And I think it's wonderful and like almost inevitable that both of you who share the same thing about working with intent with people, on not just the reshaping and the function of their home, but the reshaping and the function of their bodies through dance and yoga. That's the first thing that you do when you put it out. It's not like, I'm a carpenter, here's what I'm going to want you to pay me, or welcome to dance class, go pay over there. It's like you welcome the person, and the reason the person and you have come together is no small thing. I mean, I don't believe in coincidence. I wanted to start this webcast in 2020, and I just couldn't get my head into it. I had all kinds of things lined up, and I just couldn't get my head into it. So I figure now I have a few other folks who are pre-recorded already, and I'm ready to start assembling and getting them out there. It's like, well, now must be the time to really honor who you are, your own truth, your own process, loving your community, loving your children and your puppies too. What are your puppies' names?
Yeah, they moonlighted a bit on this call. The black pup is Bija, and the white pup is Umajeen. And yeah, they're very exuberant beings, presences in our home. Yeah.
How did you arrive at those names?
Oh yeah, that was kind of interesting. Bija, we just had, like, Todd had a bit of a feeling that it would be a name that started with a B, and then we were kind of feeling like maybe it would be like a Sanskrit word or something like that. And then we kind of were reading a bit, or I don't know, it was like a kind of a random Google search, and we were like, oh, maybe Bija. And so, or I guess his name Bija is part of a longer, Bija I think means seed in Sanskrit. And so his full name is Asaya Bija, and that means particularly a seed that, has this like potency for diverse, growth potential. And he so has been that as an energy in our relationship, in our family. And he definitely like literally and figuratively nips, or has nipped at my heels. Like when he was a puppy, he's like used to nip at my heels, but he definitely pushes you in a direction that, you're kind of meant to go. And then Umajeen, she's part Great Pyrenees, and we thought perhaps another sort of maybe a Sanskrit name or something from like mythology. And so Uma is like a mountain goddess, like Hindu mountain goddess. And I don't know
And the
how the gene.
balance.
Yeah, the balance part, which she is. They're like yin yang as well, and they're masculine, feminine, and one's black and one's white. And the cat is gray right in the middle. So yeah, we've got it all.
You take your balanced home very seriously, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I guess, but it all it hasn't been so like planned. It's come into place from following like our directive, and our home has been built in a very similar way to how Todd works, like piecemeal as we sort of see it fitting. And sometimes that's incredibly frustrating because you're like, I just want my house done.
Yeah. You built a straw
but-
bale house. Is that right? Did I see that right before?
Yeah.
That was fascinating. I was watching that and I was like, oh, wow, I've never known real people who have done this. I've got so many questions.
Maybe that's a whole other conversation. The whole house build could be a whole other.
We should. I remember watching videos of Todd torching some wood outside, and I'm like, what are you doing? You just built it. Now you're burning it down.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. But it was like, kind of led like, well, what feels right? What's next? Or
yeah,
it might seem like you kind of loop back a little before you go forward a little, but it does feel right. It requires a little bit more of that patience and trust, and not wanting to just basically like follow the blueprint to the end. It's not linear.
Yeah. Our home is a 1904 schoolhouse, and it's a two-story schoolhouse. And when we got here, there was quite literally nothing other than a hammock strung up between two of the supports pillars on the lower floor. There was a new electrical service to the house, no wiring, no plumbing run. It was just a big room downstairs and a big room upstairs. And
Wow.
we're in our 30th year here, and it's been transformed quite a lot. So I understand, Andrea, what you were saying about it's not necessarily piecemeal where you just like, pull stuff together. It's like you have a vision, then you let the vision manifest, and then you make it happen when time and money can let that happen. So right here, I'm in half of my attic, which never existed before. So that explains the really weird rake to the ceiling there.
I've been noticing that. It's very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Only fully insulated room in the house. It's hard to insulate an old home.
Yeah.
So we should come back with a talk about making homes. I think that'd be great.
I would love that.
That would be really cool. So we've been our hour for now. Is there any closing statements you guys would like to make? I would love to have you back again, seriously, to talk about more. I could do this, once a week with you guys, because it's so it's heartening to hear you guys speaking so openly and freely about things like energy, intention, manifesting. Because too often you get in groups of people where they just look at you like you're weird, and it's better to keep quiet. So I think with us being able to do this in this way, there will be no edits. There's no filters. It's just going to be heartening for a lot of other people to hear it as well. So what do you think? Closing comments, folks? Anything?
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, although I will maybe bookend it where we began with this thought of like, I keep thinking about the sort of wintry state, and like this season that we're in, we can kind of, the season we're in our world, we can sort of mirror that in ourselves, or allow ourselves to mirror that. And it is a time that offers more introspection and more quietude. And so, I think based on our conversation, I'm feeling even like more inspired to allow that sort of cocoony dark space. It's like below the earth and under the snow. And I think of being able to feel very like held and protected in that winter space to do that self-reflection. And so perhaps it's a nice reminder for anyone who might be listening to allow, whether this will be listened to in winter or not. So it may not align, but that there are these really beautiful times that we're supported in different ways to be reflective and to like turn up the volume on some of the inner voices and inner messaging that can like just keep us on the path that we're here in our special karmic place and time to be on. So.
Excellent. Beautiful. Todd?
Yeah, I would say, what's most on my mind of late is, just and has been for many years, but reminding people that, just to tune into their core and to their truth. We all have a spiritual center. We all have a connection with the divine. We all have a purpose here, something that we came to do. And just to remind people to, tune in with that and to trust your own intuitive will about things. It's always that balance between my will and thy will. But if we trust in ourselves and our heart's longings, then I feel that, as I've heard said, the right path is never that far off. All it requires is a few steps in the right direction, and then you're there. And just to continue on, it's been a dark time, but there's also a vast amount of expansion here. And as they say, the night is always darkest before the dawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hope this is the dawning of something much bigger and better.
I feel awesome. It is.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time. And we'll come back.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll talk about building homes and the joy and frustration that goes with it.
That's great.
Right
Thanks
on.
for
okay.
chatting.